Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is one of the hosts of ABC's Good Morning America, Eva Pilgrim, here to celebrate her wonderful picture book, Walter Does His Best. Before we invite Eva into the studio, I would love to invite you to check out my picture book. It's called Real Magic. Real Magic answers the question, is magic real? This is a true story of a day when I invited a quiet girl on stage to help me perform a magic trick. When I asked the audience to welcome my shy volunteer with a round of applause, they experienced something quite wonderful, a greater kind of magic. This is a touching and a beautiful tale, and it reveals a profound and beautiful truth. When we help someone feel loved, we help them do incredible, magical things. Real Magic, it features illustrations by my incredibly talented niece, Tiffany Doherty. It's available on Amazon as an ebook. Check it out today. It's called Real Magic. Joining us right now from New York City in New York. Our guest today is here to celebrate a beautiful picture book. It's called Walter Does His Best. Please welcome to the show, direct from the Good Morning America studios, Eva Pilgrim. Hey, Eva, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I was sharing with Eva. I just got back from trying to walk Augie, the doggie, here in Boston, and he shares something in common with Walter, the hero of Eva's book. He doesn't always like to take a walk.
Yeah. That misconception that dogs like to walk, it's not true.
Yeah. Especially short dogs.
Well, and Walter has a flat face, so I think he gets hot and out of breath very quickly. Also, Frenchies are notoriously lazy. Mm-hmm. So exercise is just like not his thing.
Yeah. So tell us about Walter and how he's trying to do his best around New York City.
So, a lot of the scenes from the book are actually based on real interactions that Walter has had as we have wandered around, and just sort of my observations of, I genuinely think Walter thinks he's having these, he's trying to have a good interaction with someone or some dog, but it almost never goes exactly the way that he wants. Most of the time people are very, they chuckle or laugh at him. Some dogs will bark at him. But he just has this sort of happy-go-lucky free spirit about him, and watching him as he was kind of exploring his surroundings was the kind of beginnings of this book.
Now, you are busy working as a correspondent, a host on Good Morning America. Where did you find time to write a children's book?
Well, we had that little thing called the pandemic.
Yes.
So we actually were pretty grounded, for me, for the first time in my time at ABC, where I wasn't constantly on the go. I was on the campaign trail right before, following candidates, and then the pandemic happened and we were all forced to come home and be at home. So I wrote this book from my little backyard here in Brooklyn, and was just thinking about positive things. You know what I mean? I, at the time, was trying to get pregnant. I'm pregnant now, but you start to think of all the things you want your kids to think and learn, and the lessons that you learn from your parents. And then you throw in the pandemic, and that sort of adds an extra layer of things. So that's where the title of the book came from. Walter Does His Best. I feel like all of us in the pandemic were literally just doing the best we could. And some days that was really amazing, and other days it was a total fail, but you will wake up the next morning and you try again, and little things, little acts of kindness made such a difference like you really felt the difference in that time because of the heaviness that just existed around all of us and the stress that all of us were dealing with. And so, you know, we joked, all of us who were working on the book, the editors and stuff, when things wouldn't go right, would be like, well, you know, we're all just doing our best. And it was sort of the, you know, kind of our rallying cry, like, you know, life isn't perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things you want so much for your kids to understand. Life doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect, but you know, what's in your heart and what you're trying to do, that matters more than anything.
Yeah. Who taught that lesson to you?
My mother. So my mom is this, like, as you could imagine, crazy Korean tiger mom would be. Very, like, rule-oriented, very structured. But the one thing she cared about more than anything else was that we were nice to other people. I mean, she might get really mad at us if we, like, came home with a B. But she would lose her mind if she found out that we had been unkind to someone. Mm-hmm. Because it just mattered so much to her that we treated other people with kindness. And a lot of that, I think, was based on her personal faith and the faith lessons that she was trying to teach us, but also just this idea that she wanted us to be able to be around other people who weren't exactly like us. And we were, you know, I grew up in South Carolina. There weren't a lot of half Korean kids in South Carolina. And she wanted us to recognize, like, while we're different in this way, other kids are different in other ways. And so to extend that kindness to someone who's sitting by themselves or, you know, doesn't have someone to play with or needs someone to walk with them to the bathroom during the break, you know, those kinds of things really mattered to her. So, yeah, if you wanted to see my mom mad, let her find out that you had been unkind to someone.
Well, you know, I love that, you know, that being kind, being a good person was so important to your mom. And it certainly was something that we tried to instill in our kids. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. They're adults right now, and they're pretty awesome adults. I'm really proud of them. I think it's wonderful that you not only heard that lesson from your mom, but you're sharing it with the world. You're sharing it with a new generation of kids. Certainly, you will be sharing it with your kid when your child is born, and now you're sharing it with the world through Walter Does His Best.
Yeah, well, and you know, I think as adults we like act like being kind is so easy, but like it's difficult for us some days. And so, you know, I think about like my friends that I work with and my friends in my outside of work life, and like we have to sort of like, hey, check each other, like why do you feel that way? You know, the same conversations you have with children, you have to have with each other as adults as well. It's just sort of a nice reminder for us all that life is not simple, and sometimes being just a little bit nice goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember that, you know, everybody has their struggle. You have no idea. In your brief interaction with somebody at the counter, you know, which might last a minute and a half, and it doesn't go perfectly for you, you have no idea what that person has been through the 7 or 8 hours that they had to work before you got there. And I think if we can remember that you know, that they have all sorts of stresses and challenges and people barking at them, it might make it easier for us when things don't go perfectly.
Yeah, and just to have a little grace for each other, right?
Yeah. Hey, you know, I want to take advantage of this. We don't often have network host on the show. You're a young woman. You've achieved this great thing. And you achieved it at a time when not all women had it easy, that it wasn't easy working your way up through a network. How did you do that? Where did you find the inspiration and the courage to do that?
Well, you know, there are other women that have come before me, and I've been really fortunate in my career to get to meet some of them along the way. I remember when I started at ABC, when they announced that I got the job, I got an email from Barbara Walters. It was like, I was like, is this real? Like, wait. And it was like her real email. I couldn't believe it. But, a lot of these women, they say the same thing. You just put your head down. You work as hard as you can. It doesn't become about your gender. It becomes about your storytelling. And then people don't look at you and go, oh, she's female. I never complain or talk about the fact that it does take me longer than the guys to get ready in the morning. But that's just life, like they have other things that they deal with. And that's how it works. And I think finding inspiration in the stories that you're telling and focusing on the job that you're doing and trying to show those people compassion and love when you're there, because most of the stories we cover I'm meeting people on the absolute worst day of their life. So, recognizing that and, approaching them with some humanity, this isn't just a job. This is an interaction that can really affect someone long-term, and realizing that and approaching the stories we cover from that mindset. I think that's, been a lot of the keys to the success, which goes back to that same kind of kindness message, being nice to the people that you work with, because oftentimes those people are very not appreciated by anyone else around them. They're working so hard and long hours, and it takes so many people to get any of these shows on television. It goes a long way, and people will help you and cheer for you. And it's a cutthroat industry, but there is a competitive industry, but there's also this camaraderie that exists even amongst people that you literally will turn around and you'll be like going at it, like trying to one up them on something, 2 minutes later. But there is this camaraderie of this sort of purpose that you carry. And so that you find that in common with them, and that binds you more than it sort of makes you dislike each other. You have tons of respect for them and the work that they do. And they will help you. I mean, one of the greatest journalists that helped me I was like a baby reporter on the crime beat in Charlotte looking through police reports. And I remember there was this senior reporter. He was like, what are you doing? And I was like, they told me to find a crime story. And he was like, well, you're not going to find it in there. I was like, what do you mean? They told me to look at the police reports. He's like, oh, honey. And he worked at a competing station. There was no reason for him to help me, but he did. And he kind of explained to me how you work sources and how you develop sources and build relationships with people and learn communities. And I remember the first time I beat him on a story, he was like, I'm not helping you anymore. That's the sort of relationship you end up with most people that you work with and work against. It does have that sort of that gel that binds us all together.
That's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Glenn counts.
Awesome. Hey, one of the things we heard way too much over the past few years is this idea of fake news and bias, and what advice can you share with parents in terms of helping kids learn how to look at the information that they're getting? Because kids are being bombarded with information all around them. I grew up with a newspaper, and there was three news shows during the day, and it was on during dinner time. And that was it. And then you heard rumors in the neighborhood. But now kids have the internet and cell phones and all these different apps and platforms and loads of news outlets competing for each other. And you can look at the same story being told by two different sources, and you would swear that you're looking at two different stories. I mean, these people couldn't possibly be talking about the same thing. They're telling completely different stories. How can parents help their kids really discern what is credible and what isn't?
Well, I think you have to sort of look at what are these outlets, right? There are different tiers of outlets with different levels of safeguards in place. For instance, at ABC, we have every single story that ever gets on air or on our website has a legal person and a standards department person that overlooks the story, on top of an editor, a senior producer. Like there are lots of eyeballs that go on to a story that seems to be about the most mundane thing before it ever hits the waves for public consumption, right? That's not the case for every outlet. And I think understanding some of that process for the different outlets, and what are they doing to fact check? What happens when they get something wrong? And filtering that out for your kids, having the discussion about people have different opinions about things. And that's okay. We're allowed to have different opinions and disagreements about how we feel about certain things, but the facts are the same. And you can kind of find those truths in each of those different articles. I was showing a college student this the other day, several different outlets, same news story, completely different, as you were saying, but the numbers were the same. Some of the information was the same. Seek that information out and then try to figure out the rest of it for yourself. Because truthfully, you want to be able to make your own decision as an adult, but also you want your children to be able to use their own critical thinking to decide what they think is right and best for them as well. And so you do some of that sort of like, searching in those articles, which seems crazy, but you will find those common threads that sort of exist. The headlines, I think, sometimes can be a little misleading from outlet to outlet, but the facts that are the actual meat of the story, although they might seem very small when you start to read through, there only may be like 3 of them in there. Those will be consistent. And I think that helps to find the truth. And as journalists, we have to really work hard at that. What is the truth? That's the question we're always asking, right? It's not what's convenient or what do we think, or, it's like, what is the truth? And trying to seek that out. And I do think when I look around at most of my colleagues, that is what they are searching for, that whatever their personal thoughts are, they're able to sort of check them, or at least, push them off to the side, because there's enough other people involved in the process to sort of, hey, wait a minute. Did you write that line with that language because you think that's wrong? And we sort of keep each other accountable that way. Again, that doesn't happen everywhere, but I know for where I work, it is very important. And they try very, very hard to stay down the line with just the information and let people sort it out for themselves how they feel.
Yeah. The big takeaway I get from what you just said is that we have to help our kids understand that if you want the truth, you have to dig a little bit deeper than the headline. You have to take the time to find out.
And you have to read. You can't read just the first sentence, right? Like so many of us, even as grown-ups, will see a headline on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and it might say one thing, but you read the first paragraph and you're like, wait a minute, that's totally different from what the headline said. Your headlines serve a purpose. They're to get you to click on them or to create a reaction from you, not necessarily to give you the full story or information. That's never the purpose of a headline.
Yeah. One of the things I loved as I was reading Walter Does His Best is that you take us to a land that so many of us haven't visited, which is New York City. Or if we visited, we've done the bus thing and driven around, New York City is a very unique place to live, and it seems like it's a place that you really love.
I'm from South Carolina, so I grew up with a backyard and all the normal suburban things like a Target and a Walmart. And living in New York is very different than that. I have a car now because of the pandemic. I've been driving a car, but before I would never have driven a car in New York. It wasn't a time. I would have lost so much time in the day trying to drive a car. Now I do, but yeah, you find the community if you look for it anywhere that you live, right? So I live in Brooklyn now. I literally know everyone on my block, and most of the businesses know Walter. because he helps himself to being inside their stores. And so we've created this life for ourselves where we very much, walking down the street, hey, Walter. I mean, I don't know that anyone knows my name, but they all know Walter's name. And it has been, it's been special and it's been good. It's, when you do the job that I do, which sometimes can be kind of heavy, it's nice to come home and like people recognize you when you're walking down the street because of your dog. And to have a positive interaction over someone so silly, it's like, it's great. And New York has so much to offer. The culture, the food, that New York attitude that I think sometimes people think can be a little like rough on the edge. You chip into it a little bit and people will help you, and they're super kind and super nice. And, it's been eye-opening. I didn't think it would ever feel like home, and it definitely does.
Yeah. Yeah. People who don't live in the Northeast, Boston, Philadelphia, New York City, I think they can be taken aback sometimes by the kind of gruff exterior that people, demonstrate. But, when push comes to shove, I find that the Bostonians and New Yorkers and Philly folks, they're really willing to step up and help out.
Oh, yeah. I lived and worked in Philly before I moved to New York. And I will tell you, if someone is mean to me on Twitter, it's the Philly folks that will go after them. I don't even have to say anything. They just go after them on Twitter. It's so great. I mean, because as direct and honest as they are and critical sometimes of you, it's their love language. They're trying to help you. They don't want someone to be mean to you, though.
Absolutely. So you shared with us that, Walter Does His Best happened in large part because of the pandemic, and you had this time in your hands. Hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we're coming out of the pandemic. Might be getting into a little bit of surge right now, but hopefully soon we'll be returning to some kind of normal. Where will you find time to write more of Walter's stories?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have, I say that, and I have a baby that will be arriving in September. So I feel like all of that could be kind of thrown into the air. I don't know. I'm not really planning much past September because I feel like it might be a little foolish to think that I could take on a lot, but I'm hopeful that we can do another Walter, story. And I am very committed to taking time off just for my own sanity. So hopefully, there's several weeks in my future that I'll have off, maybe even a month if I'm lucky, that I can sit down and sort of have time to play with those ideas in my mind.
That's awesome. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Walter Does His Best and more about Eva Pilgrim.
There is a website that is set up for the book and for Walter that has an activity guide that I was there was a connect the dots and all of these coloring pages that are super cute that I can send you. Mm-hmm. And of course he has an Instagram. Walter does. It's Walter Unleashed, and then I have Instagram as well, Eva Pilgrim. So if they can look there, and then the book's on Amazon.
Awesome.
And at some booksellers.
Yeah. And we always encourage, we love what Amazon was able to do for us during the pandemic, but we also love our local indie bookstores. So pick up the phone, call your local bookstore, and say, hey, do you have Walter Does His Best by Eva Pilgrim? Can you get it for me? It'll be there in a couple of days.
Yes, we love our local bookstores.
Absolutely. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Walter Does His Best, Eva Pilgrim. Hey, Eva, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Two fantastic guests. Christina Pellegrino will be here to celebrate Buster and the Brain Bully. It's her debut picture book. And Chad Sell will return to the show. He's celebrating the Cardboard Kingdom Roar of the Beast. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated at how very difficult it can be to market your book. We can help. We have a wonderful program. It's called Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. If our panel of teachers, parents, and kids believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes a number of really powerful promotional tools that can help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. Did you know that there are over 1,000 books published every single month? No exaggeration. That is accurate. There are thousands of books published every single month. It's really hard for your book to stand out. We can help. We can let parents know that your book is worthy of their consideration. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, scroll on down to Certified Great Reads. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Eva Pilgrim. Please be sure to check out Walter Does His Best. Also want to thank my team. They always do their best. Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.